Brian Sloan, the president of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and welcome to what is the Blueprint Nebraska unveiling of the report that has been coming for about 14 months, and we couldn't be more excited. We are broadcasting from 3 different sites this morning: Broken Bow, Lincoln, and Omaha. I first of all would like to thank our site sponsors, Adams Land and Cattle in Broken Bow, Southeast Community College in Lincoln, and Union Pacific in Omaha. Thanks to them, we have the facilities and productive capability to do this today. With me in Lincoln today are Governor Ricketts, Interim University of Nebraska President Susan Fritz, Lincoln Chamber of Commerce President Wendy Birdsall, and Kayla Meyer, a young professional leader in Lincoln. As I said, approximately 14 months ago, we kicked off the Blueprint Nebraska process. And it was a process that was really created by Hank Bounds and Governor Ricketts to develop a longer-term economic strategy in Nebraska to meet increasing competitive threats nationally as the business environment becomes more competitive each year. They worked with our 2 co-chairs, Owen Palm in Scottsbluff and Lance Fritz in Omaha, to develop a steering committee and a process that has led to today's report. And I think will make a difference for Nebraskans, not only for this generation, but for generations to come. I think, as most people know, Nebraska is the greatest place to live and work in the country. So it's not a question of have we been economically successful. We have. The question is, for the next decade or 2 or 3, what are the things that are going to keep Nebraska competitive, keep us growing, and create those opportunities for our kids and our grandchildren? And 2 areas particularly you'll find in the report that we're focusing on for the next 10, 20, or 30 years. One is something that we talk about all the time, and that's people. Our population growth and our workforce growth is simply going to have to be a lot larger as we go into the next couple of decades to continue to compete against states who are growing faster. And secondly, innovation and technology. Whatever industry we're in, whether it's agriculture, manufacturing, services, whatever industry we're in, technology is becoming a bigger part of it, as are startups and innovations and entrepreneurs. And that's an area that Nebraska needs to be very successful in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. So you will see in this report a lot said about that. So in today's briefing, we're going to give you a summary of what's in the report, and the report will be available online as soon as this briefing is over. As we started this process, though, the question was, how do you do something statewide? And so I'm from Western Nebraska, but now live in Omaha and Lincoln, and too often we get caught up in the urban and rural divides when we talk about policy issues. What this process was about was something totally different. This process was about Nebraskans from all over the state coming together, taking off their local parochial hat, and saying what's best for Nebraska in terms of a long-term strategy. And everybody has to win in Nebraska for this strategy to work. It was powerful, and I hope Scott Frost will forgive me for this, but what's needed to pull this off is a unity of purpose across the state. And what we saw over the last 14 months was an energy level as leaders from across the state got together to put together what you see today. I'm not saying it was exactly Memorial Stadium, but it was exciting. And it yielded some very good results that I think are going to be a catalyst for growth as we go forward. So let me start the process of talking about the report, its development, and what's in it. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Lance Fritz, the CEO of Union Pacific Corporation in Omaha, to talk about the process and to talk about the Blueprint Nebraska vision. So Lance, could you take it from there?
I'd love to, Brian, and thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to start by introducing the individuals that have joined me here in Union Pacific Center this morning. On my right is Andrew Presti. He's the co-founder of a startup called Event Vesta, and he's going to have an opportunity to talk to us a little bit later on about his thoughts on the blueprint. To my left is Leslie Anderson. Leslie is the president of the Bank of Bennington, and she was one of our steering committee members. And Winsley Durand is to her left, and Winsley's part of REACH, which is an initiative by the Greater Omaha Chamber to expand the diversity of our subcontractor and contractor community. And he was also part of the industry councils with Blueprint Nebraska. So let me start off by saying, why get involved? Why get engaged? And for me, it starts first and foremost with what our vision is, growing the good life. I believe that with all my heart, that Nebraska does represent the good life and we can be even better. Nebraska is critically important to Union Pacific. It's the home of over 7,000 of our employees. It's our corporate home. We're right here in the corporate headquarters, the Union Pacific Center in Omaha, Nebraska. It matters deeply to us that our host state, our home state, is thriving. And it's deeply important to me and my family. I raised my children here in Nebraska. We consider Nebraska home. I love its rugged beauty. I love the communities and the welcoming nature of our communities. I love the connectedness and the passion of our people. You can see that everywhere you run across Nebraskans, whether it's here in our great state or somewhere else. So let me start by talking about our 5 big goals and then what our 4 big themes are that support those goals. And then I'm going to deep dive on 2 of them before I turn it over to Andrew. So what we care about in terms of achieving goals is we're talking about job growth. We're talking about quality of life. We're talking about retaining our young population. We're talking about R&D investment. And we're talking about income growth for the jobs that we support here in Nebraska. And you'll hear more about that later, and you'll also see details of that in our summary. Supporting those are our 5 big themes, or our 4 big themes, excuse me. And those big themes are people that power the economy. They're about places that we connect and are welcoming. They're about government that's simpler, more efficient, and more effective. And they're about a handful of economic sectors. Actually, it's more than a handful that Nebraska can be uniquely good at. Now, let me dive a little deeper on 2 of those 4. I'll start with people. We started with people because people are the economic power behind an economy. And that's true in the state of Nebraska as it is everywhere else. When we think about developing a place where people can thrive, it starts with jobs. And so we have a line item in there talking about public-private partnerships that pursue kind of best-in-class internships and apprenticeships in our state. It's about education, and we talk about from early childhood through career and making us the state where lifelong learning is a reality and just a natural outcome. We talk about making sure that we're a state where diversity and inclusion matters. We've talked about that quite a bit this morning amongst ourselves. And when we think about competing as a state, we want to compete with every element we have at our disposal. And that means every population demographic that we can get our hands on, we want to make our state look attractive to, so that we can include them in the economy. And then when you switch over to industry segments is about making sure that the segments that we're naturally good at, we leverage and grow and invest in more deeply. So you start with the agricultural economy. We are an agricultural leader, and we think we should be the agricultural tech leader in the United States and the world. We think we should be the host for a manufacturing center of excellence. Our economy is very strong in manufacturing, and that would be a natural outcome. We think there are certain industries that we're particularly good at. Think about fintech, insurtech, medicine and medical tech, transportation. You think about construction and architecture, design. Those are industries that we should be able to compete in, and not just compete in, but lead as a state. So that's kind of a nutshell of 2 of those 4 themes. And let me turn it over to Andrew for your observations on the blueprint, why it matters to you.
Thanks, Lance. And I think this really speaks to the power of the Blueprint report, that there was a number of things that stood out to me as well that you had kind of touched on there. But when thinking about the high level growth of both the economy and the talent in the workforce, to me, that always seems to boil down to opportunity. That for especially young professionals, it's the opportunity to have the personal choices, whether it's owning a house or living in a dense urban center, or the professional choice to have a career that really excites them and engages them. And when I reflect back on my own story, more than my familial ties, more than my excitement to see a great coach like Scott Frost coach the Huskers, it's really been those opportunities that have kept me here in Nebraska. The opportunity to serve on the Chamber's Young Professional Council, the opportunity to graduate from Creighton University with my bachelor's and master's with almost zero student loan debt, and the opportunity to work on 2 different tech companies that have raised over $1 million in venture funding. Those are the opportunities that will keep young professionals in Nebraska and continue to grow the good life. And there are 3 key pieces in the Blueprint plan that will ensure it keeps growing. First, entrepreneurship. As Lance said, continuing to work in those industries that we've traditionally succeeded, because from the farmlands of Western Nebraska through to Flywheel here in Omaha, no pun intended, entrepreneurship has really been the flywheel that has grown the Nebraskan economy. And one of those key resources, the second piece, is a talented workforce. And by focusing on education, Blueprint Nebraska really will work on growing that as well. By focusing on early childhood education, a place that has returns for decades to come in a student's career, and STEM education, so that we have that talented and skilled workforce that can build those startups as well as strengthen our existing companies here in Nebraska. And finally, to bring it home, they need a place that they want to call home. And by working on a bunch of different ingredients to build thriving communities, from diversity and inclusion to arts to public transportation, Blueprint in Nebraska will work to make a place that these talented young professionals choose actively to call home.
That's fantastic. So thank you very much, Andrew. We're going to kick it over to my good friend and partner, Owen Palm and Broken Bow at the Adams Land and Cattle Company. Owen?
Hey, thank you, Lance. Greetings from Broken Bow here this morning. I want to start out by introducing some of my colleagues here that have been part of the Blueprint Nebraska initiative. On my right, I guess the camera's left, we have Gary Pearson, who's the president of the North Platte Chamber. Sitting next to Gary is Deb McCaslin. Deb is a former executive director of the Custer County Economic Development Corporation. Deb was also a member of our, or I guess in charge of the Community Vitality Industry Council. To my right here is Mitch Hunt. Mitch is a young professional from Custer County here, from Broken Bow, and he'll be talking to you in this broadcast shortly. To my left is Jerry Adams. Jerry, thank you for the use of your facility. Jerry has been an important member of our advisory council, and seated next to him is Pat Keenan with Keenan Investments. Pat is also on the advisory council. So that's the group we have here in Broken Bow today. Over the last 16 months that we've been working on this project, I've just been, absolutely amazed and impressed with the engagement of the 300 plus people that have been involved in this initiative. And this group here is absolutely no exception to that. For me, the most rewarding part of this project has been, meeting lots of great people across Nebraska and making new friends that I would have never met had it not been for the Blueprint Nebraska initiative here. I would especially like to thank my co-chair, Lance Fritz, who has become a great friend, but more importantly has been a great partner in bringing this phase of Blueprint Nebraska to completion. So thank you, Lance. I also want to recognize former Senator Jim Smith, who's been our executive director on this journey. Jim has been invaluable from every aspect. He's kept us on task. We've met every deadline with his help. He's mediated the various discussions that come up over the course of an initiative like this. He's been our lead fundraiser and just really been the project champion for this thing. So thank you, Jim, for that. As has been stated, Blueprint Nebraska is a long-term strategic plan aimed at improving the prosperity of our communities and residents across the state. We'll accomplish this by creating better opportunities in a variety of ways for the state's residents so that we can all live, work, and play better in this great state. Through the Blueprint Nebraska process, we have identified 4 growth theme initiatives that support our vision of growing the good life. Lance has described 2 of these initiatives around powering our economy with people and growing our most promising business sectors. Let me spend a minute talking about the last 2 growth themes. The third growth theme we have is building a simpler, more efficient government. And that's at all levels, at the local level, the county level, and at the state level. To this end, we propose 3 high priority initiatives that fully support the governor's desire to and priority on controlling government spending. First, we propose to realign our current tax structure from top to bottom. Second, we want to reimagine the delivery of how government services are deployed across the state today. And third, we want to optimize our economic development incentive strategies that are used in the state. Our fourth and final growth theme suggests we take advantage of the beautiful places that we have here in Nebraska. To accomplish this, we propose 4 high priority initiatives. First, rejuvenate our community's main streets and town centers with targeted investments that create the best places to live, work, grow in any area in the Midwest. Secondly, we propose to build 30 to 50,000 housing units across the state with a coordinated initiative between the public and private sector. Third, we propose to increase broadband connectivity in rural Nebraska, as well as an initiative to deploy 5G network in our larger cities. Fourth, we want to take advantage of our geographic center of the U.S. location to focus on freight and logistics opportunities, while at the same time expand the state's transportation interconnectivity with things such as an east-west flight and enhanced international and national departures from our largest cities. So these 4 growth themes define the blueprint for growing the good life in Nebraska. We believe we've taken a bold path forward by defining these 15 high priority initiatives that support these growth themes and promise to transform the state by 2030. I'd like to turn it all over now to Mitch Hunt. Mitch is the CEO and founder of an enterprise called Huntrex, located right here in Broken Bow. Mitch, would you tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on Blueprint Nebraska?
Absolutely. Thank you, Owen. I first want to start out by saying that how awesome it is to have such industry leaders joined by young professionals like the 3 of us. So that's a really cool part of this program. I wanted to start out just by giving a little bit about my background. So I'm a 5th generation Nebraskan. I started Huntrex at a fairly young age. It's something I've always been passionate about. I love business and I love Nebraska. I think one of the reasons that I love Nebraska so much is the amount of care we each have for each other, and the amount of the ability to work with industry leaders, and to, in a small environment or in an environment like Nebraska, we're able to really work together and be a community, which I think is really important. So through Huntrex, I've been able to grow a marketing communications company with a focus on web design, but I've also done video production as well as other design work for companies spanning all the way from tourism to manufacturing. And I don't think I could have done that outside of Nebraska as well. And I think it's just because we care about each other, we're so tight knit. That is a really nice asset for any entrepreneur, especially a young entrepreneur. So I'm also an alumni of Leadership Nebraska, which it's another way for people to get engaged. I think engagement is very important. And we just talked about that. Andrew spoke about that. I think we need to be able to have our young people engaged in our industries, engaged in our communities, and that creates a sense of belonging. And that belonging will enable them to say, you know what? I want to call Nebraska home. I want to live here, and I want to bring my friends. And so I think that's really important. So yeah, I've seen firsthand a lot of our assets and our opportunities. And I think we have to think about what opportunities are available to our young people and be able to communicate that in a way that shows them, yeah, you know, I have some big dreams. I can make that happen in Nebraska. There is a matter of perception that I've heard about from people who they wonder, you know, is Nebraska the best place to do this? You know what? I think it is one of the best places in the country to grow a business and to grow a family. So I think we have a lot of opportunities. I think we need to capitalize on those. Nebraska does have a firm foundation. I think we have that culture of trust. We are a hardworking people. We have a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of big businesses here in Nebraska. And we have that can-do attitude that I think will be a great service to us. So I think technology is going to be another big asset to us. Technology is transforming the way we do business, the way we live, the way we work. So I think if Nebraska is able to get on board with technology, be able to show the world, you know what, you have this big idea, you can do it right here in Nebraska. I think that would be a big asset for us here. And that's not just for new businesses, that's for existing businesses as well. We can reinvent our existing businesses to be even more technologically advanced and grow in that capacity. And I think the way that Nebraska is envisioning its future in the Blueprint Nebraska program is really cool. We're able to see where we've been, what our assets are, what our opportunities are, and we can use that to be even more powerful and better economically and in other ways in the future. So with this program and everything that I'm seeing happening in Nebraska, all these positive things, I'm confident that I'm in the right place at the right time. So I see this as a step forward in engaging with my generation and bringing more people in. And I think it'll be a great opportunity for us. So I have my roots in Nebraska, my company Huntrex does, and I would love to see our state flourish. So I think we're stronger together and we can accomplish great things. So I'll transition back to Owen.
Thank you, Mitch. That very well said. I will now transition back to Lincoln here, where we'll hear a bit more from Brian Sloan, President of the State Chamber. But before I do, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize Brian for his personal contributions to both this report and the entire process, not only the last 14 to 16 months, but as we move into the future here and begin with implementation. So with that, take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Owen. Appreciate it. And thanks to everybody on Broken Bow. Before I turn it over to Kayla here to give one more young professional view, Kayla, I got to tell you, I turned 62 yesterday, and so I'm still recovering a little bit from just the thought of it. Many times during this process, we, as a committee, we would be in a meeting, and ultimately we would come down, what's the ultimate metric here? What are we trying to accomplish? And more times than not, we'd say, you know, in the end, it's not to get more Brian Sloans to live and grow and build their businesses in the community, because my runway is getting a little shorter, although Mrs. Sloan thinks it needs to be a little longer. But is how do we attract and retain more 25-year-olds to 50-year-olds, that core part of the workforce? And so I'm very interested in, from your standpoint, what do you see in this blueprint process that is going to be helpful from that standpoint?
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm Kayla Meyer. I'm the coordinator for the Lincoln Young Professionals Group. We are the largest young professionals group in the state with over 2,000 members, so pretty proud of that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself first, and then I'll tell you what I really noticed about this report that really got me. I've lived here in Lincoln since I was a little girl. My parents moved here from California in the early 90s, and they moved here because of the high-ranking school system. They wanted a place to feel safe, and they wanted to know their neighbors. I've grown up with Midwestern values, a love for my neighbors, and a huge love for my city and my state. I now get the privilege to raise my two daughters here in Lincoln. They get to learn in our school system, enjoy the parks, the trails, the zoos, and even better yet, they get to know the people of Nebraska. And that's what I'm really excited for. There were many pieces of this report that struck me as very important. One of them being the initiative on diversity and inclusion. This goal will work on not only connecting our communities across the state, but hopes to make Nebraska the most welcoming state in the Midwest. That is huge. That is incredibly important. Being a welcoming community isn't just an important issue for ourselves, but it's also an important issue for retaining and attracting that talent. Businesses thrive when we have that talent at our disposal, and the best talent. They're only going to come here if they feel welcomed. I look forward to the great state of Nebraska stepping up and being a true welcoming neighbor, no matter what race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or handicap. I'm really looking forward to that initiative. The other initiative that I know is important to my age demographic is building an achievable, livable housing units. Housing affordability is so important to my age demographic as well as the economic opportunity for these communities. It's a selling point and a competitive advantage for employers. Affordable homes also support the local workforce. When they live close to their jobs, they can spend more time with their families, and that's incredibly important. The growth that I've witnessed in the state and the city in the last 10 years is huge, and I'm really excited for Blueprint Nebraska to build on that momentum. Thanks.
Kelly, thank you very much, and thanks for participating today. As we finish up the unveiling of the report, we're gonna end where we started, which is to be truthful about this process. This doesn't happen unless the governor of Nebraska and the president of the University of Nebraska get together and say, this is important, this is an investment we need to make in the state. And so really the two people that kicked this off and got this started were Governor Ricketts and Hank Bounds. And so Governor and Susan, on behalf of the university, I want to thank you because it doesn't happen without you guys. And so Governor, you're the governor, so you can speak as long as you want. Would just like to get your thoughts.
Great. Well, hey, thank you very much, Brian. And thank you, everybody who is on this call here today to unveil Blueprint. It really is an exciting time to be in Nebraska. We have seen tremendous economic activity here in our state. I'm sure many of you are familiar that we have won the Governor's Cup from Site Selection Magazine now for 3 years in a row for the most economic development projects per capita of any state in the country. We received the Silver Shovel Award from Area Development Magazine just this year for the quality of some of those projects. We have some of the lowest unemployment rate here in our country. And we've got a number of other accolades that we've had here. Mercator Center at George Mason University says we're the #1 most fiscally stable state in the country. We've got the second highest workforce participation rate in the country. Forbes says we've got the second best regulatory environment of any state in the country. We've got the third highest wage growth of any state in the country since 2014. CNBC says we're the fourth best place to find a job, and Forbes says that we have the fifth best state for business overall. And all of these things help us attract that investment, which creates the jobs for our Nebraska families. And that's what Blueprint Nebraska is all about. It's about laying out the blueprint for our future growth of the state, as Brian was saying, over the next several decades. It really was a citizen-led effort that had, as Owen was talking about, over 300 people that were directly involved, whether it was on steering committees or industry councils, but thousands of Nebraskans participated as well, giving their feedback on where we should go with the state. And it really helped talk about some of the important things that we're going to need to go, where we're going to need to go going forward. And really will create the basis of that debate and dialogue on these projects. I mean, a lot of what's in Blueprint right now will be at a conceptual level, and part of what Blueprint will do going forward is figuring out how do we take this from the conceptual level down to more concrete steps. And that's what really will create this discussion that we'll have going forward. So this really is the beginning of the process, not the end of the process with regard to where this report's going. And I'm excited to be able to work with the folks at Blueprint especially around some of the areas that we talked about how we continually look for ways to make government more effective and more efficient, more customer focused, how we can work to control our spending and thereby deliver tax relief, especially property tax relief, and then also work on connecting our young people to those great paying jobs that we have in the fields like technology and agriculture and manufacturing, and the real strengths of our state. So again, this is really an exciting time, and I look forward to seeing where Blueprint is going forward. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the interim president of the University of Nebraska, Susan Fritz.
Thank you so much, Governor. And Brian, thank you for that introduction. Governor, I'm looking forward to working with you in the coming months to grow Nebraska. This is such an exciting opportunity that we have before us. I also would like to extend my thanks to Lance Fritz and Owen Palm for their vision and their commitment to this process. And on behalf of President Bounds and the University of Nebraska, I also would like to thank the thousands of Nebraskans who took the time to provide their input into this very important process. It's almost mind-boggling to think that we have had this much input and these many steps in a process in 14 months. What that tells me is there is a great, broad commitment to increasing the economic vitality of our state. And I'm very excited that the University of Nebraska can be part of that. I also would like to say that I personally have the opportunity to participate in Blueprint Nebraska and served on committees along with my colleagues from higher education across the state. And we are all very excited about what we are able to bring to the table to help in the effort in implementing the recommendations found in Blueprint. One that is of particular interest to me is working together with my colleagues to stand up a statewide data system that will allow us to track outcomes for Nebraska students. We will be able to use facts to track our recruitment, our retention, our graduation rates, and our outcomes for students as they go into the labor market, and eventually then to determine if we're meeting the workforce metrics that we have set forth. Now, when I talk about those partners, I'm including, of course, the University of Nebraska campuses, the state colleges, the community colleges, the Department of Education, and the Department of Labor. And we have a laser focus on making this possible for our state, and we think it's a game changer as we look at answering the needs in the workforce. I will also say that it's been heartening to hear Andrew and Mitch and Kayla. Very exciting to hear from young voices that Brian represent a demographic I'm no longer in, but they represent the future. They represent the future for Nebraska. And we know, based on some of the work that Hank Bounds reported, we know that we have a tremendous opportunity and a need in the workforce area. It is up to us to make certain that Nebraska is a place that we not only attract top talent to, but we retain top talent to. So it's a workforce, it's a quality of life issue, it's all of that. And I think that we are prepared to hit that head on. So I would like to say that the University of Nebraska is very excited to participate in implementation of the recommendations of Blueprint Nebraska. We're delighted to be here. And now I would like to turn this back to Brian Sloan, who is clearly a champion of the cause. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Governor. Thanks for all your leadership on this. I'm going to wrap this up with answering what has to be the first question on everybody's mind, which is this going to be a report that simply goes in a 3-ring binder and sits on people's shelves, or is there something that's going to come out of this? Because we've all seen reports before on many issues. This one, I think, is going to be a catalyst. It's going to be a catalyst for the next 10, 20, 30 years of economic development in Nebraska. Will it be the only thing? No, but I do think this will be a turning point that we'll look back and remember and say, this was a big deal. And 2 reasons why I think this report becomes a big deal and actually gets implemented and executed in a way that makes a difference for this next generation of Nebraskans. First, we're putting together an implementation structure and program and people to make it happen. What we learned in this process was the power of this process was every time we got all these Nebraskans from all over the state in a room together, and they took off their parochial hat and they said, let's do something really special for this state. That group still exists and it's not going anywhere. That group is going to continue. We are going to continue to have a statewide steering committee made up of many of the former members that are going to continue until this gets implemented and executed. We're also going to add to that steering committee many new stakeholders and broaden the input and the expertise now that we've focused on these 15 initiatives. In addition, with respect to that big steering committee, we will also create steering committees around these 4 themes, specific to each one of these 4 themes. And over the course of the next year and a half, you will start seeing, beginning in the final quarter of this year, 5 of the initiatives be fully developed and be publicly disclosed. And the same thing will happen in the first and second quarter of next year. So all 15, our goal is to be working on and implementing by no later than mid-part of next year. Throughout that process, the state chamber and our local chambers, Wendy, will continue to support that process and provide horsepower where we can to make sure that the business community is engaged and active in this process. But the final reason why I think this works is Nebraskans will do what they always do. They'll stand together, they'll make a difference, and they'll make it happen for the next generation. Immediately prior to today's discussion, we had a little Crete, Nebraska reunion out in the hallway. I know there were people that were making it happen when I was an elementary student in Crete, and it's time we return that favor. Having sat in these meetings and watched this group of people work, I am 100% confident that we will move this forward in the next couple of years, but we're going to need everybody's help. And so where do we go from here? How do you get involved? Well, the first thing, immediately after this session today, the full report and as well as the summary will be available on the Blueprint Nebraska website. That's blueprint-nebraska.org. And you should download and read those reports and develop your own thoughts. What are the pieces you like? What are the pieces that you want to work on? And then how do I get involved? Well, there's going to be many forums and ability to do that, but one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be coming to a number of communities relatively soon. And you will have the opportunity, and so check the Blueprint Nebraska website for community meetings, and those will be posted there and give you an opportunity to participate in this process. We'll also be looking for people to participate in steering committees and other events in order to flush out the details of some of these initiatives. And finally, just bring your positive energy and wear that hat with a great big N on it. It's Nebraska and not whatever parochial interest you have. And this will get done, and this will be a difference maker. And again, if Scott Frost will forgive me, the unity of purpose and the same level of effort, we will be competing against the Floridas and the Texases for years to come, not only on the football field, but economically. So thank you for everything, and I've got one last thing I have to do today. The most important person to this process has been the executive director of Blueprint, Jim Smith, former Senator Jim Smith. Owen talked about his cat herding role. That's putting it mildly. Who would ever think that you could get all these people from the Panhandle to the far eastern portion of Nebraska to work together and come up with this product? The work he has done has simply been outstanding. He is a leader in this state that has really made a huge contribution through this effort. And so I would like to finish with just a recognition of Jim for all his work. Thank you very much.